I still remember that night as if every detail had been etched into my memory forever: the quiet warmth of the room, the soft light casting shadows that danced across the walls, the subtle hum of the city outside barely audible but somehow comforting. It was the kind of night where the world felt small and intimate, just enough space for the two of us to exist together, and I could feel in my chest a nervous anticipation that made my heartbeat skip in a way I hadn't felt for months. She had arrived earlier that evening with her usual mix of confidence and gentle warmth, the kind of presence that makes a room feel alive yet safe at the same time. We spent the first part of the evening casually, talking about mundane things, our days, little frustrations, the funny things that happened during the week, but all the while there was an undercurrent, an invisible current pulling us closer, that neither of us fully acknowledged at first. I had felt it before, in subtle ways: the way her hand lingered a moment too long on mine, the way she laughed a little louder when I made a joke, the way our eyes met for a split second and held each other longer than necessary. It was there in those small moments, unspoken yet undeniable, that something more than friendship had begun to take shape between us. As the night progressed, the conversation naturally deepened. We talked about our childhoods, about dreams we hadn't yet shared with anyone else, about fears and uncertainties that usually remained tucked away in our private thoughts. I noticed how she spoke differently when she was with me, softer, more candid, revealing layers of herself that she rarely allowed others to see. And I realized, perhaps more clearly than I had before, how much I cared about her, not just the casual kind of fondness, but a feeling that made my chest ache with both excitement and a little fear. It wasn't just admiration or attraction, it was the kind of love that makes you think about someone when they're not there, that makes ordinary moments feel extraordinary simply because they exist together. At some point, the casual talk gave way to a more tender atmosphere. The laughter slowed into gentle smiles, the playful teasing into quiet moments where our hands almost touched but lingered just short of contact. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, a feeling that something significant was about to happen, and I could feel my own nerves tightening like a coil in my chest. I had been thinking about asking her something for weeks, something that had lingered in the back of my mind, a question that I knew could change everything between us. It was not the kind of question one asks lightly, not something you can take back or answer casually. And yet, there I was, on the edge of a moment I had imagined countless times, rehearsing it in my mind, trying to summon the courage to speak the truth of my feelings. Then it happened. She leaned closer, her eyes glinting in the soft light, and asked me a question so casual it almost didn't seem serious: "Is there space in your bed?" The words were simple, but they struck me in a way I wasn't prepared for. My heartbeat accelerated, my palms grew clammy, and for a moment I considered giving her the easy answer, the one that anyone might have expected. I could have said yes, laughed, brushed it off, and let the moment pass as a fleeting intimacy. But something inside me resisted, something deeper, that told me this wasn't a question about a place to sleep. It was a test of connection, a door to honesty and vulnerability, a chance to lay bare my heart in a way I had never dared before. And so, instead of answering the literal question, I looked into her eyes, letting the quiet stretch between us, letting the gravity of the moment settle like a weight in the room, and I asked her something that had been on my mind for weeks, whispered in a voice that trembled slightly: "Will you stay, forever?" The silence that followed was instantaneous and deafening. I watched her blink, her lips parting slightly as she processed my words. There was a flicker of surprise in her expression, a softness that I had not seen before, and a hesitation that only confirmed to me how important and fragile this moment truly was. I could feel my pulse in my ears as I waited for her response, aware that the seconds stretched longer than they had any right to, filled with unspoken emotion. I watched her hands clench in her lap, noticed the subtle shift in her posture, and realized in that moment that love was not always about grand gestures. It was about the courage to ask the questions that mattered, the willingness to be vulnerable when it could change everything. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet but deliberate, carrying the weight of her own feelings. She didn't laugh, she didn't retreat, and she didn't offer a deflection. Instead, she looked at me with an honesty that cut straight to my chest, saying things she had never voiced before. She admitted she had felt the same way for a long time, that she had wondered if I would ever be brave enough to ask, and that she had hesitated because she too feared the vulnerability that came with commitment. The moment was surreal, like time itself had slowed to accommodate the depth of our emotions. And in that instant, everything changed. The question had been answered, not just with words, but with the unspoken understanding of hearts that finally recognized each other. We spent the rest of the night talking quietly, carefully exploring the new dynamic between us, navigating the sudden intensity of emotions that had been building for months. I could see the softness in her eyes, the way her shoulders relaxed, the slight smile that hinted at a happiness she had not allowed herself to show before. It was not a dramatic declaration, not a cinematic confession, but something far more real, a mutual understanding that we had both crossed an invisible threshold, that intimacy was no longer merely physical or casual, but something deeper, something eternal. We shared fears, dreams, and the sense of possibility that comes only when two people allow themselves to be completely honest and entirely open with one another. Over the following days and weeks, the weight of that night continued to resonate. Every time I thought of her, every time I saw her smile, every time we shared a quiet glance, I was reminded of that pivotal moment, the instant when everything shifted. It taught me that courage is contagious, that vulnerability is not weakness, and that love often requires a leap of faith far greater than we anticipate. I thought back to the way she had leaned closer, the casual phrasing of her original question, and marveled at the subtlety of the moment that led to such a profound outcome. It wasn't a sudden declaration or a dramatic gesture, it was a quiet, tender conversation, a question that started with curiosity and ended with the promise of forever. I also reflected on how much timing matters, how every small interaction leading up to that night had created the conditions for honesty and openness. The months of friendship, the slow build of trust, the shared laughter and private jokes, all of it had prepared us for that pivotal moment. It made me realize that love is rarely instantaneous, it is cultivated through care, attention, and the willingness to be present for another person, even when the outcome is uncertain. The night she asked about space in my bed was not just a test of proximity, it was a catalyst, a doorway into a deeper connection that neither of us could have forced or predicted. In the end, what I learned from that night goes beyond romance. It is a lesson about life itself, about the importance of asking questions that matter, of risking vulnerability, of embracing uncertainty with courage. Love is not about convenience, nor is it about comfort alone. It is about recognizing the value of someone's presence, the depth of their trust, and the willingness to share your life with them fully, even when it scares you. The act of asking her to stay forever was as much for myself as it was for her, a commitment to honesty, to openness, and to the possibility that two hearts can align when the time is right. Looking back, I see that night not as a singular event, but as a turning point, a moment where careful preparation met courage, where curiosity met honesty, where fleeting intimacy became a promise that would echo through the rest of our lives. It was a night that showed me the power of words, of questions, and of quiet acts of bravery. It reminded me that love can be found in the smallest gestures, that a casual question can become monumental, and that sometimes, all it takes is the courage to ask the right question at the right time for everything to change forever. And so, whenever I think about that night, I don't think of it as just a memory, I think of it as a lesson in bravery, trust, and the incredible power of vulnerability. She asked about space, and I asked about forever, and in doing so, we discovered that the greatest moments in life often come when we dare to speak our hearts, when we embrace the risk of honesty, and when we allow ourselves to hope that the person across from us might just stay, not for a night, not for a week, but for a lifetime.